Welcome to the Role of Emerging Technologies in Federal Emergency Response Summit. Uh, it actually sounds a little strange to be saying that. I never thought I'd be logging into a summit, a virtual summit with a pandemic 90 days ago. I don't think you did either. I know we had our DevOps Summit back on March 10th in downtown Washington, D.C. Had a lot of fun with that. We were kind of like not very serious about pandemic. I will tell you that. We didn't know the extent of it. We didn't know what was going to happen. We probably had 300 people at that summit. On Wednesday night, the president addressed the nation. And then at 6 a.m., my team was at Wegmans. A lot of us were shopping. We were worried about our families. People were at Wegmans at 6 a.m. Things have changed. ATARC's had to transform. I haven't seen my team since. That's not exactly true. I've seen my team on Zoom. I've seen my team on virtual platforms. And by the way, we use the FedRAMP version of Zoom. That's been a thing. All physical events have been canceled for the foreseeable future. The federal government has an enormous transformation in the last 90 days like we've never seen, at least as far as IT. VPN tunnels have been added. Laptops have been issued. Workers that had not been remote before are now remote. The DoD even released a memo allowing video communication. It usually takes 18 months for the DoD to release a memo, and it took like about a week. Folks that are used to working on systems, either in data centers or on DevOps teams, now they're remote communication. It's really changed the way the government's done business. Probably most importantly, new citizen programs had to be launched. You're going to be hearing about some of these today. IT modernization, a theme for ATARC, takes on a whole new meaning. We had an IT modernization summit last fall, and now you really have to take these plans that you had that were shovel ready and do them. So we've got a fantastic day for you, starting with a keynote by Suzette Kent in a few minutes, and it's followed by a thought leadership panel with a great mix of IT leaders. I actually think it should be renamed the IT Action Panel. You're going to hear about a lot of these stories of what extraordinary measures were taken by these leaders, and it's going to be fantastic. So we also are going to, after we have our IT Action Panel, we're going to break out into tracks, and they're covering our 5 tech pillars: cybersecurity, cloud and infrastructure, data and analytics, DevOps, digital mobile. We've got over 50 speakers today. All will be recorded on demand in the environment for 30 days and then archived on the website. Last but not least, we have our industry partners. We've got over 40 industry partner booths that you can interact with in the virtual halls that mirror our pillars. We can't do this without them. And also, we're trying a new capability that we didn't do with our physical events, where you can get badged for your activity. You download a white paper, you get points. You look at a video, you get points. You visit. It's kind of a fun gamification. I used to work at the University of Central Florida and for the Institute for Simulation and Training. We really want you to take a look at all the things that are out there to offer and get your market research in. It'll be a fun game. If the person on top of the leaderboard, we will put something out to charity. So without ado, we'll introduce Suzette Kent, Federal CIO. She's been really, really busy, and she has a message for us. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Suzette Kent, Federal Chief Information Officer. Thank you, Tom and ATARC, for inviting me, and I hope that all participating today are safe and well. I appreciate your being here, spending time exploring the role that technology has played in federal emergency response. The theme for today's session is the role of emerging technology in federal emergency response. And while I'm certainly going to cover many points about advanced and emerging technologies and what we did in response to COVID-19, I'd like to start with an overarching statement. Technology has many roles in any federal emergency response. has a role in maintaining mission continuity, a role in providing resources and information internally to responders and externally, informing the public, and of course being an enabler of the response and providing solutions. And it's the responsibility of the people listening today and our broad IT community to ensure that we use those capabilities in the best interests of the people of our nation. We have the technical capabilities to do many things. Technology lets us have quick speed to action. It gives us the ability to consider information far and wide. It gives us the opportunity to be transparent and to share decisions broadly. With those empowering tools, we must continue open forums and dialogues to ensure that the path we are choosing best serves the mission objectives and best serves the people who are at the heart of the mission. So, we are now 3 months into the largest and longest telework situation that the federal government has ever experienced. In that time, we've been pleased to see that many of the focused areas of the President's management agenda have served us well. Investments in modern infrastructure, the flexibility and scalability that cloud-based solutions have afforded us, the rapid response actions that were possible because we had configurable commercial platforms with reusable services. And our investments in data have also proven to be an accelerator for our response efforts, ranging from tactical protocols for sharing across mission spaces to the work efforts on tools which yielded faster actions and steps to mature the data quality which helped support data-driven decision-making. There's also been inspiring proof points and partnerships across agencies and mission spaces where the business and technology community work together to find ways to do things differently. I could spend my entire allotted time here today sharing success stories across all the executive branches. But we're lucky, a lot of those have been covered in the media already. And I would encourage you, maybe after this, to take a look at some of those. I'm going to highlight a couple of examples. But it's important to understand that these cover many of the areas that are going to be on the agenda today. Like scaling and rapid application development demonstrated by SBA and Treasury. Quick cybersecurity actions that we saw from DHS and DOJ. The business process pivots by VA, SSA, and Department of Energy. The data initiatives by HHS, Labor, USDA, Interior, and Commerce. Workforce enablement actions by Education, NSF, NRC, EPA, State Department, Transportation, and the DoD. And GSA, OPM, and OMB taking rapid action to support working differently and focusing all agencies on our primary mission. On behalf of the CIOs, I could share, again, example after example, but this is the way that modern and emerging technologies were at the forefront of their individual response actions, but they were also the foundation of how they achieved mission continuity. Agency leaders, our vendor partners, and the IT community moved together with urgency and with focus to achieve some historic outcomes. But we can't stop with this one event. We have to take the learnings and look at how we move forward to prepare for future emergency events and to drive more efficiency going forward. Our last CIO Council, we spent a good portion of the meeting talking through those learnings from this specific response, but our goal was really to identify the things that had worked well, to highlight proof points for future investments, to ensure that we can articulate why we needed continued investments in specific areas, and determine the places where we needed to take more action, where we had gaps. The types of topics in this conversation range from some extremely tactical, very technical discussions to some broad themes that are going to require ongoing discussion and all of government collaboration. I'm going to share a couple of those topics in hopes that it might spur both some comments today, some considerations, and conversations about how we move more quickly. So some of the tactical points included things like, how do we scale fast, whether it's cloud solutions or call centers? And what do those capabilities look like, configured in a way that can be used by multiple agencies? We considered areas where increased development of reusable tech is needed, a faster path to data sharing protocols, and maturing places where data is frequently updated and needs to be incorporated into decision making. We also talked a great deal about improving and expanding authentication and identity management tools as we move more services to being digitally delivered. A few of the topics that were more strategic and will require those longer, more expansive conversations included things like understanding the impact of the digital divide on citizens and our workforce, to make sure that as we expand digital interactions, we understand the impact of connectivity, of access, and of usability for all of the audience types and the unique needs of our citizens. We need to look at approaches to modernizing end-to-end processes that require partnership between federal, state, local, tribal, or territorial governments. Although agency use of collaboration tools individually worked very well, we identified areas where we needed tools that were interoperable or worked across all agencies. And that's something we're going to have to continue to focus on, whether it's online collaboration, document management, or other types of things. Interoperability and commonality of tool sets be important as we think about the challenges for the future. These are examples of the types of actions that we can take to leverage what we learned, what we saw as response during this pandemic. But these are also some of the actions that help us better leverage technology to improve citizen experience overall. The challenge I would put forth for this group is to look at the technology successes that we had, the progress that we've made, but ask the question, how do we go faster? How do we accelerate what we're doing? How do we build on these successes and we reinvent the workforce? What are the next digital services that need to be deployed, and how quickly can we bring those to bear? How do we use data and technical capability to inform decision making and drive transparency and ensure that we are poised for quick response? Although there was no precedent for moving most of the federal government out of a physical office and to working from home, agencies had thought about what we needed for mission continuity and what we had to have to be able to allow the workforce to operate and continue to serve citizens. Mission continuity is a needed capability and an investment that should continue to be a top priority. I hope that you're as optimistic as I am about the future possibilities, because when we take a look at what this response has proven that we can do, the possibilities for the future are endless. The themes don't change, but the urgency of action does. I also hope that what we've collectively experienced will emphasize to government leaders and to Congress that we must continue to prioritize modernization and secure digital services. Although there were many quick actions in the pandemic response and many success stories, we must also address our technical debt, our legacy footprint, and process reinvention. And those are things that are not solved quickly. We have to stay focused on long-term transformation at the same time. The way that we achieve better outcomes for American citizens, whether it's in an emergency or whether it's in our day-to-day mission activity at agencies, is through multiple things. Things that should stay on our agenda. Progress on the federal data strategy and advancement of analytical capabilities. Deployment of automated technologies to the right use cases so we can move more quickly to better serve citizens. through expanding our use of cloud and scalable solutions so we don't have to build capabilities over and over again. And remaining focused on developing a citizen delivery environment that is largely digital and mobile and accessible by all citizens. We have the proof points of how we can be more efficient, not only in an emergency response, but in normal times. Now we have to ensure that we're well positioned to continue our advances, to take what we learned, so that regardless of what the challenge is, we have the capability to tackle it. I thank you for your time here today. I hope you do celebrate some of the successes achieved. You take the learnings that are shared across the various speakers and you move those forward. But most importantly, all of those things are stepping stones to how we build a better tomorrow. Thank you, and I hope you have a great session today.
Thank you, Suzette, for that. And we're really, a lot of these policies that came out last year, we're really seeing the value of them and the implementation of them. And we look forward to working with Maria Rote, who was at SBA, the CIO, of course, and who's going to be the new deputy. Thank you very much. We're ready to launch into our panel. Sorry about the technical difficulties earlier. It's one of these things that you can't foresee everything, and this is our first experience in this new platform. So there's been a few snafus, but I will get this next panel going with some introductions, and then we're going to have each of the panelists talk a little bit about their agencies and how pandemic has affected them. I think you'll get some good, interesting stories out of that. And then, if, time permitting, it would be great to get some few questions from the audience. But without further ado, I want to introduce the panelists. First, we have Rona Bunn, who's the Chief Information Officer of ITA. And congrats to Rona. She just recently, I think in the last 10 days or so, went from acting to Chief Information Officer. Rona's also on our board. And we look forward to her talking. Von Noga, Chief Information Officer and Deputy Assistant Administrator for the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. Glad to have you, Von. And Devarius Peoples, Chief Information Officer of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and they've been very, very busy with a lot of work around pandemic, of course. Scott Flanders, Deputy Chief Information Officer of the NRC, Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And last but certainly not least, Sanjay Gupta, Chief Technology Officer at SBA. And when we get out of for the government folks on the call, when we get out of pandemic, I would love for Sanjay to continue to do his tours of the great work they've done with the CDM pilot, and very, very impactful. And they get a lot of government people to go there and they see some of the things they've done with their dashboarding. It's very, very cool. I was lucky enough to go. So we will begin. Rona, do you want to give us a good 5-6 minutes about what you're working on over at ITA?
Sure. Okay, so just for those who don't know, ITA is the International Trade Administration, and we exist to strengthen the competitiveness of U.S. businesses. And we have many programs that deliver services that promote trade and investment, and we ensure that there is fair trade through the enforcement of trade laws and agreements. And so we have a number of things cooking over at ITA. I think initially we wanted to kind of talk about what things were affected during this pandemic, and so I'll talk a little bit about some of our experience with that. So fortunately in ITA, we have really been in a forward-leaning position for a couple of years with regard to the technology that services the programs that supply our internal customers and external clients with the things that they are looking for or need to use. And so, with regard to the mobile, our current architecture is really kind of built. It is built and maintained with mobility in mind. We want to make sure that our end users, as Suzette said, have the services that they need and they can securely access what they need whenever they need to at their fingertips and no matter what device they're using, whether it's a laptop, tablet, phone, whether it's GFE or non GFE. And that really helped us to be able to move from, just going from a 25% regular telework workforce to almost 98% within with full capabilities within 1 week. Um, what was really great in this situation, and so I love to look at things from the positive. Fortunately, we were already in a place where we were looking to increase adoption of collaboration tools, and so we had planned to launch for about a month in after we actually had to go to mandatory telework to use Microsoft Teams in a way that would help our people, collaborate virtually. So we had already planned to do that, and so we just accelerated our implementation. So it did cause us to do that. We had some training that we had scheduled um, to do. We just kind of pushed that up, and that actually was really a very good opportunity for us to increase adoption. We had a small goal for 20 and trying to get to 20%, but we got to 100% adoption overnight. Um, and so now our users are very comfortable using those tools internally and actually externally. We're using Microsoft Teams to collaborate using the advanced functions. So we have stepped up. We're now kind of getting really mature with the basic functions, and we've now started to get them to use the more advanced functions that will give them some additional functionality that they thought they did not have at their fingertips. Um, so although the work environment change was mostly positive, we weren't without challenges. And so with regard to the equipment, Suzette mentioned that earlier. Also, yeah, we had some units that were lagging in the issuance of security compliant or working mobile equipment, phones and laptops, and that kind of forced us to have to come up with creative solutions to equip the staff. And then it also did bring upon a policy change that we had to make. We planned to do later, but we moved it up in priority and we're addressing it now, reorganizing and centralizing the IT asset management so that we can control this situation in the future better. With regard to digital, so that is the thing that we have really been focused on. About 2 years ago, we had what we call a Vision 2020. Actually, it was probably 4 years ago. Started talking about how do we service our clients better, faster, making sure that we can get all of the things that we have available, all the services that we have available to the clients to make sure that we're advancing the mission. And so, in the last probably maybe towards the beginning of when I actually started, we started working on digital services. Maybe not typically in an organization, you have digital services within the CIO organization. We took it on and we stood it up. And so we have an Office of Digital Strategy and Engagement that it was working on unifying our web presence. And we just in January stood up a new digital ecosystem with a unified web presence, state of the art, best in class system for delivering digital services, which allows us to rapidly change when we learn things about our customers. We're able to we have a working population that typically right now has been, or in the recent past, has been servicing their clients through face-to-face meetings. They do that to garner leads, to provide counseling, to facilitate business-to-business conversations that will eventually lead to deals. And obviously, that's a challenge under these current circumstances. Our new digital platform allows us to be able to offer these services virtually. And so now we have lots of clients that are requesting virtual meetings and virtual assistants. We are now able to help them. We've expanded significantly the ability to access things by self-service. And we are actually able to understand. We're working to understand what they're looking for and when they're looking to get it. And we've implemented a few things, a few artificial intelligence or machine learning things where we are able to serve them up what they're looking for based on a few things that they have answered when they registered. And the more they ask for things, the better we get at serving things up for them as automated. Um, we also have been working on a few things with data that have helped us to better understand. So our analytics capabilities on our new digital platform allow us to understand and test things out to see what is the best way that we can serve up the things that they're looking for. And recently, we actually did a test where we could see if we call it A/B testing, where we can see if we offer it this way, do they want it, or if we offer it this way, do they want it? And we learn from that, and we're able to instantaneously change our site and across the site so that we can deliver to them, deliver it the way they're looking to get it. Um, I think that you guys asked a little bit. Some other things with regard to security. We were always configured to be able to offer things in a mobile environment. We didn't really have many changes with regard to the security environment. However, and I think others probably can attest to this, that we have seen an uptick in these sophisticated phishing schemes. And so we have adjusted our training to make sure that our users understand when they're getting phishing, they're being phished. And ours are actually pretty smart. So our team is very busy because they're being reported all the time. And so that's about all I have to share this morning with regard to what we are working on. And I'll defer the rest of my time. Thank
Start. Yep. Thank you for that. That's a great start to kick things off. And Vaughn, you want to go next? Vaughn Noga.
Thanks, Tom. Hopefully you can hear me. So thank you for that, and thank you for the opportunity to present to the audience. I think, with respect to the EPA and how we responded to COVID, the mission of the EPA did not stop. Protecting human health and the environment is a priority that we have and we take seriously. I'm not going to paint a rosy picture. Certainly, we did have some of our challenges early on. When you move 14,000 people to a remote environment, even the best planning is tested, and the best infrastructure that you're able to field is stressed. So we did experience some issues within the first week and a half with just load on the VPN. But the team at the National Computer Center and the folks here in headquarters spent a lot of long nights making sure that our folks could connect and use the VPN. And at the same time, really started looking at the technologies that we had previously deployed and how we could better leverage those technologies off VPN. So we made the transition to Office 365 many years ago. We've implemented the technologies, SharePoint, OneDrive. We've implemented Skype. And last year, we actually did a Skype adoption campaign. And it was interesting, this was during normal operations. It was a challenge to get folks to start using Skype. However, I will say once we went into the COVID response, we had just at that start of that started piloting Teams. We had about 600 or so folks across the agency who started using Teams. And I would say within 3-4 weeks, we went from 600 folks to over 10,000 folks who had quickly adopted Teams, and it is actually now the preferred method by which we do communications within and with our external stakeholders as well. From a planning perspective, we've actually, and I've been with the agency since 2008, and I would say our journey for mobility started in the 2008 2009 timeframe. We made a decision early on to start equipping our employees with mobile devices, with laptops, and so the transition in that first week, barring the issues we have with the VPN, were fairly transparent. Folks were able to take their technologies and work remotely and work remotely successfully. I would say I think one of the outcomes of the initial couple weeks of the response was just the communications internally. I work in the Office of Mission Support. We work closely with our folks in HR. We work closely with our folks on resources management, safety and health. And one of the things that we identified early on was, we still have new employees we're onboarding. We still need to equip these employees with technologies to make sure that they're successful on day one. And through the partnership across HR and our resources folks and the folks in IT, we were able to pivot to a 100% virtual onboarding experience, and we're able to ship technologies to those new employees so they could be successful on day one. And I think these are kind of some of the lessons that we've learned. You quickly figure out how to adjust service delivery. And that's one of the things that I actually am most proud of, not only with our folks in IT, but with our folks across the agency and with our partners, our support contractors partners as well. And Tom, I'm going to pivot back because I want to give the other folks an opportunity, and I think you've got some follow-up questions that we can engage in. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Tom.
Oh, thank you for that, and we will get to a host of questions at the end. Next, we want to hear, and he's actually making his ATARC debut, the various Peoples, Chief Information Officer, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Welcome to various.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all for the opportunity to just kind of go over some of the great things that the Corps is doing to really support the nation through the challenging times that we're facing with COVID-19. So the Corps of Engineers has three unique aspects to the mission. We are an Army agent, and we are the Army Construction Element Agent for DoD. One of the other critical missions we have is a disaster relief mission, and that is fighting floods, different other type of things such as COVID-19, which we help build some of the alternate care facilities. And then we have the Civil Works mission, where we assess as well as protect the waterways, levees, locks, dams, and those type of things for a lot of the state and local regions. So with that being said, the Corps is uniquely dispersed. We have about 40,000 users within the Corps. We're in about 55 different districts and divisions throughout the United States and 123 countries, OCONUS. So as you can tell, the footprint of the Corps is very large and expands. One of the things on a day-to-day basis when you begin to talk about VPN, on an average day before COVID-19 hit at the Corps, we probably saw maybe about 500 users hit the VPN every day. That's not a lot now compared to the 22,000 users we see on an average that connects to the VPN every day. We had to aggressively scale our VPN to meet the aggressiveness or the demand of the users. At one point in time, we had a capacity of about 5,000. So that was probably over the course of 4 days, we had to aggressively expand from 5,000 to up to 80,000, which that's how many we can hold now. And we actually maintain 2 data centers strategically located in Vicksburg, Mississippi, as well as in Portland, Oregon. At the beginning of COVID-19, when the demand or when the directive came that, hey, we will go to massive telework, we started telework with a fiber cut. Fiber cut at our major data center in Vicksburg, but the fiber cut was in New Orleans. And working with our mission partners, we had to aggressively get those data centers back online because that was the exact way users were able to connect. That took us about 12 hours. So you can imagine the discontent and the heartburn of many of our users, as well as our external partners, as we try to aggressively get those things taken care of. In 4 days, we were able to achieve that. And we've been operating in a pretty good posture, a pretty good construct ever since. As you know, we've helped build a lot of the alternate care facilities for a lot of the districts and divisions. And that was very, very important to the success of the nation. One of the things working in conjunction with DoD, Department of Army, and the DoD CIO, we leverage the Microsoft Teams through the CVR, which is a commercial virtual remote environment, which allows us to effectively communicate and collaborate, not just within the Army, but with the Navy, the Air Force, and others. That is approximately the 4 million users inside of DoD. The Army has about 1.2 million of those users, and we are all able to enroll. It's just a matter of username and password, being able to log into the system, which then allows you to be able to be even more remote. So within the Corps of Engineers, we also take full advantage of those Microsoft Teams capabilities. So now we have the ability, without having to log in through VPN, but to be able to access through our mobile devices, whether that's iPads, iPhones, as well as our laptops, which can be government furnished or GFE equipment. We have the ability to effectively collaborate. One of the things we also have the ability to do is to access OWA, which is the Outlook on the web access, without having to go through the VPN. That was critical for a lot of our users, because being that we're in distant locations, some access to network is more prevalent than others due to the latency that comes along with those distant locations, such as Walla Walla and Montana. So we've had the ability to really enhance our end user productivity through a lot of our commercial and remote capabilities, but we've also worked collaboratively with the DoD CIO, the rest of the department, to include other Army entities, to ensure that we are not just protected, but can effectively communicate and collaborate. And Army Cybercom, which is another Army element inside of DoD, as well as Department of Army, they've really helped us enhance a lot of our security. We see an uptick in the cybersecurity aspect or arena, but we do have a lot of protections in place to be able to mitigate and combat anything that comes about. So the team is working collaboratively. That's an attribution to the good professionals that we have at the Corps. So other than that, I think that's kind of a good rundown from a Corps standpoint. Definitely looking forward to the questions at the end of the discussion. Thank you for the opportunity. That's all I have.
Yep. Thank you, Devarius. Scott Flanders, Deputy Chief Information Officer of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Tom? Thank you for the opportunity to share the NRC's experience with pivoting to the COVID-19 and the remote telework situation. I would frame our activities around three things. One, the preparation that we put in place for the agency to be able to work remotely. Some of the infrastructure upgrades that we had to do, and then some of the process reengineering that we had to do to help support our mission offices in terms of continuing to carry out their mission while remotely working. In terms of preparation for remote work, so this is something that you've heard from the others that we've been thinking about for some time, and we've been working towards. We implemented Office 365, I think in the 2017, 2018 timeframe. We transitioned to Windows 10, and we issued, at the time when we transitioned to Windows 10 in 2018, we issued all of our staff laptops. And so at the time when it became a situation where we had to move the entire agency to remote work, we were well positioned because folks had already had new laptops that had just been issued. We also had already established the ability to access our files, emails, certain applications through. Certainly, we had VPN in place, but we also had a Citrix in place, as well as Office 365, which gave people three ways to be able to access their files and applications they need to execute their work remotely. The one thing that we did worry about was the number of folks who really prior to the COVID-19 situation really implemented telework. We would typically at the most would see maybe 600 VPN users. We did have some folks that teleworked. And so leading up in early March, we started really thinking about, okay, as this gets closer and closer to a situation where we're looking at full-time remote telework for everyone, how can we make sure that our staff is really ready to go? And so we implemented a week-long session preparation where we would invite folks down to actually be able to ensure that they understood how the telework. So we had a whole session and where we invited all employees where they could come in and get trained on how to use the different tools, make sure that they were registered in order to access our systems. We had two-factor authentication. It required that they had a second-factor authentication capability registered through our ICANN program, and to make sure that everyone had those things set up in order to be able to support them working remotely. And then on the last day of that week of kind of training folks on and making sure that they understood how to telework, we sponsored an agency-wide telework day to really test people's understanding and ability to use the tools, but also to test our systems and their capabilities to be able to support that full-time telework. And that actually was a very good experience, because we did that on a Friday. The following Monday, we moved to maximum telework, and then within 2 days, the agency was in the mandatory telework situation. And so the timing was very good in that sense. And from that telework day, it did give us some insights into our systems and where we potentially needed some upgrades. And again, recognizing we were scaling our VPN from, like I said, the most 600 daily users to a situation where we have up to 3,000 concurrent users. We wanted to make sure our VPN could support that, and so we did identify some things. And early on, we did have some challenges with our VPN, but the service provider really worked with us well and provided good support to adjust some of the VPN issues. We also had to upgrade some of our circuits and bandwidth to support the VPN bandwidth needs, given that we were scaling up to by such a significant amount to over 3,000 users. And we're in a situation now where we have 98% of our agency on full-time telework. So we've really spent a fair amount of time moving and positioning ourselves to be able to support that. One of the other issues that came about as a challenge for us was assuring that we continue to maintain our patch management, our cyber hygiene. And one of the things that we quickly realized is that with such a load on VPN, when you're having so many users and we're running many Skype sessions across the VPN, that our patching consumed a significant amount of bandwidth. And so what we did was we moved to an Azure CMG, which allowed us to allow folks to be able to have our machines patched without going through our VPN. So it allowed people to it allowed people to go directly to Microsoft Windows to get updates, as well as through the Azure cloud to get updates to other third-party applications such as Adobe and other activities. And so that allowed us to be able to patch our computers without going over the VPN, which saved a significant amount of bandwidth and was very beneficial for us in terms of assuring that we continue to maintain our cyber hygiene, but also did not impact our staff's ability to carry out their day-to-day work activities. The last area I'll talk about is some of the process reengineering we had to do. As a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, there were some of our reactor licensees that, as you can imagine, were challenged. They have very specific staffing requirements they have to have in terms of operating the nuclear power plants, and they needed some relief as a result of all of the issues that were going on with COVID-19 and the challenges they were facing in terms of staffing. And it's a very formal process by which you get a relief from those regulations. But we needed a way to be able to execute those relief requests in a very efficient and efficient manner. And the current process that we had really didn't allow, particularly with so many people working remotely, didn't allow for that to happen as efficiently as what we liked. And so what we did is we stood up a web form that allowed the applicants to go in and submit their information to apply for the relief request, and then also allowed our staff to be able to process those applications all virtually in a very efficient way. We were able to stand that up in about 8 days from the time we had the discussions with our mission office in terms of their needs. And then later we also expanded that to some of our other non-reactor licensees who also needed similar types of relief request processes put in place. And so that was an area that was particularly important to be able to accomplish in a very short period of time. And we had some other activities such as increased use of e-concurrent. There was a need for expanded use of that. We had developed a method for e-concurrence, but we didn't have much adoption prior to the COVID-19 situation. And following, once we moved into COVID-19, we certainly got more adoption. I think we heard earlier about the situation with Skype and the challenges with adoption of use and the use of Skype. We had similar challenges prior to COVID-19. And I think, once we moved into the COVID-19 situation and folks were forced to use Skype, they really did invest themselves in understanding and learning the technology. And so that's one thing that's been positive in terms of the COVID-19 situation is the adoption, and I think the willingness for staff to use more of the tools and being more comfortable actually using those tools. So I think I'll stop there. I have others that I could talk about, but I'll wait for some of the questions and maybe expand on different points then. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. And as I said before, I don't know how you got to the back here, but last but not least, we have Sanjay Gupta, Chief Technology Officer at SBA, and you've been a little busy over there, from my understanding. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. And Tom, being a little busy is an understatement, I would say for sure. Our days and nights have kind of melded together, and all for a good cause. So I'll talk less about that, but let me kind of talk about how we at the SBA have been, we were selected to be amongst the agencies at the forefront of the CARES Act. And I'll talk about that as well. But let me just kind of give a quick intro for myself, and then we'll dig into what we've been doing and keeping us all busy here at the SBA. Sanjay Gupta, Chief Technology Officer at the SBA, came to the federal government about 3.5-ish years ago. Still feel learning a lot in the federal government. My entire career before that has been in the private sector, CIO, CTO for about 14 years in the private sector, Fortune 1000 companies. Prior to that, I led a consulting practice at a major consulting firm. And then when I was a CIO, I guess I was not busy enough. I was writing and authoring and publishing papers with another major market research from the IT space, sharing my experiences with fellow CIOs and CTOs. That's me in a quick nutshell, but that's what I bring to the SBA. So let's talk about the current times and COVID and how we have been responding. So let me kind of just put a few framing ideas in the mind of people, and then we can sort of talk about how we continue to address it, how we addressed it, and we continue to address the fairly challenging situation. I won't use the word unprecedented because that tends to be overused. So I'll try to avoid using the word unprecedented. Anyways, as we started on the journey on mid to late March, I think the first order of business was 100% telework. And I think why that is a foundational element from our response was continuity of business operations. It sounds simple, but that is a paramount factor in SBA's ability to respond to all of the requirements from a CARES Act. And why that is important is we were able to move in a telework situation fairly quickly and fairly smoothly. And there's really 4 contributing factors that allowed us to get to that. Number one, and no order of priority or importance, we had started our modernization journey back in 2017 timeframe. And so the first part of that modernization, amongst others, was laying a very strong foundation from a network infrastructure standpoint. So we had started doing the upgrades back in 2017 for all of our locations within the country. And so that had been completed, obviously, in the last few years. More importantly, we had started with our cloud modernization journey back again in 2017, which, by the way, had come very handy at the time of the 3 major disasters, Harvey, Irma, and Maria timeframe, in our ability to respond to those disasters. Number 3 was we had moved into a cloud-based office productivity solution, and which also allowed us to use a lot of the online cloud-based collaboration tools. That again, in hindsight, we had not known what the COVID-19 situation would bring to us, but certainly that was an instrumental factor in our ability to respond. And I emphasize the cloud-based office productivity tools, but I'd like to also emphasize that We, as some of you may have known, at the SBA had been leading in terms of implementation of cybersecurity tools and solutions, which are also cloud-based. And I know Tom had referenced about the TIC modernization, Trusted Internet Connection Modernization initiatives at the SBA, CDM, the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Program by DHS modernization as well, and some of those programs we had led. So some of those things, it's a confluence of these factors that allowed us to be in a telework ready state, and that allowed us to maintain SBA's business operations in a strong manner. And why this is important is because the two loan programs, and if you recall back on March 27th, is when the CARES Act got enacted. It actually had allowed 10 days for the CARES Act to be, if you start implementation on. But we at the SBA, I guess, we tried to take on those challenges as always. So we started the implementation program within 7 days in terms of being able to start the two major loan programs, if some of you may have heard about, the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program, and the second one, which is two flagship loan programs, EIDL, or Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. Let me try and sort of put a little context around both of these programs and sort of help you gain an appreciation of the scale of operations that we've had to move up into. First off, so as you all know, under the CARES Act, we have about $659 billion, the B with a capital B, which is for the PPP program. We roughly about 500 billion of that already dispersed, and the balance still sort of available. But to put this in context, we in a normal year do somewhere between 30 to $35 billion of loans and guarantees. And now what we typically do in a 12-month window, we were doing in a 24-hour cycle. So that'll help you sort of appreciate the level of scaling up, quite frankly, an exponential scaling up that we had to accommodate to respond to this. So that's one sort of data point just to sort of help you contextualize the scale up. Another data point I'll kind of use on the EIDL side is, so SBA's history is about, I think, 66, 67-ish years. So in the entire history of the SBA, which is 60 plus years now, all of the loan programs through our disaster program, you put all of that amount together. We have, in the last 60 or 90 days or so, exceeded that amount of loans in terms of disaster loans that have been provided in the entire history of the SBA from a loan disaster loan program. So that allows you to sort of, again, give you a frame of reference in terms of the scaling of the operations we're talking about. And certainly none of these two programs have stopped. So this is just sort of a point in time sort of contextual reference point. So hopefully that gives you an appreciation of the scaling we had to do. So having said that, so how did we do that? And how do we still continue to sort of overcome the challenges that we continue to be facing here? And mind you, all of this was happening as some of the programs, and rightfully so, as some of you may have been following the news, the PPP program, as it was launched back in March, as the program unfolded, we saw some outcomes, and then the outcomes were probably not as well as they were desired to be. So they got adjusted or tweaked, rightfully so, to adjust from what the program was producing, right? So we have a set of changing requirements from a business standpoint. We have a exponentially highly scalable situation that we're dealing with, and we have to be responsive, obviously. So for the most part, I would like to say that the SBA had been fairly responsive. Yes, there were a few bumps in the road. I mean, at this level of exponential scaling, it's hardly imaginable that we would not have seen some bumps in the road. And we probably will see some more, I would imagine. But for the most part, our programs and the delivery around the PPP program, as well as the EIDL programs, continues to be, knock on wood, fairly smooth and successful from that standpoint. So let me just talk about two elements that we did and the fundamental approaches we use to help us sort of address the scalability issue. So it's not just a volume issue, it's a velocity issue. And the velocity is really the critical factor. Volume, not as much. But when you put the velocity factor into play, that's where really the challenges were something that were unimaginable, truly speaking. So the approach we used, and I used, if you will, was about taking an augmentation approach, meaning We obviously could not change, replace, or completely move systems from the current setup into a new setup, if you will, or a more modern setup overnight or over a few days. But we did have the ability to augment those systems. And so that was the approach we fundamentally used in our ability to augment our systems. A few things I know some of you have already covered about the fact that once we go to telework, our cybersecurity situation changes. I mean, the frame of reference changes, our contextual reference changes, our ability to monitor these devices changes. But because of the fact that we had successfully deployed all of our cybersecurity tools, we did have the visibility into all of our assets across the SBA enterprise. And even if when people moved into a telework status, quite frankly, that did not make much of a change from our ability to monitor, manage, track, and secure the IT assets. A couple other sort of highlights I want to talk about. As we launch some of these loan programs, we introduce new portals for citizens or customers to come in and submit their applications or check their status, etc. Obviously, these loan programs, as you would imagine, were directed only for small businesses or entrepreneurs or individuals from the United States. So early on, as I looked at we have a fairly good visibility, as some of you may have probably seen or known. I realized that we were getting traffic from, pretty much from the entire globe. And so early on in the process, we recognized that we could, from a technology standpoint, implement solutions that would allow us to, if you will, geofence our web properties. And so we implemented some of those geofencing rules so that allowed us to restrict the traffic, the incoming traffic, into our portals to be, from the United States and the territories as well, from that standpoint. So it reduces the burden, if you will, from a standpoint of receiving applicants or applications that may not be meeting some of the basic eligibility criteria, as an example. So this is something which was mission impacting, but our ability to manage it in a modern fashion allowed us to reach that point. I'll talk about another sort of aspect that we learned very quickly. And I'm doing more, and I'll talk more about in other subsequent presentations, is about, and I want to talk about the fact that a lot of organizations, including SBA, use email as an intake channel for receiving customer inquiries. Long ways of saying there's an email ID at sba.gov, or you can fill in your organization.gov or .org or .com domain name, which is what you say, send inquiry here or ask questions here. What we recognized was that mechanism as an intake mechanism for receiving customer inquiries is, quite frankly, obsolete. The volume and velocity at which we were receiving inquiries was simply, the email-based method was simply not able to handle it. So we, over a few hours and few days, we improvised several iterations of a solution that allowed us to still keep that intake channel from email, but be able to harvest this information and triage that information using some automated tools to be able to identify and create cases. And here's the part about it. We implemented 3 versions of this solution in hours. So here's another sort of takeaway that I want to share with you all is the unit of time went away from months or days or weeks into hours. There were times where we implemented solutions which went from 0, no solution in place, no idea about what that need is, into less than 100 hours to having a fully fledged implementation of a portal or another solution. And so our unit of time went from months and weeks into hours. So we used to talk about, okay, in 4 hours from now, we'll have this. In 10 hours from now, we'll do this. In 24 hours from now, we'll have a test site. And then 48 hours from that, we'll do that. You get the point there. So we've kind of changed the paradigm of time and the unit of measure of time as well. But there's a lot more I can kind of talk about, but happy to be here and share the experiences here. It's certainly been a very, very fun time. And we quite frankly, one last point I want to make is we couldn't have done this, the SBA, without our support of our partners, vendors. We were having an overwhelming outreach, and together with our partners, we were able to collaboratively, climb the mountain, if you will, and we continue to do that. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to you, Tom.
Yeah. Well, I think you were being very modest on the unprecedented thing. I think a lot of the work that you guys have done has been unprecedented, amazing. Uh, so for those in the audience, please ask your questions. We've got some good ones, and I've got some too. We've got about 20 minutes. We've got a couple around this. So just to step back, I remember at the beginning of this pandemic, everybody was on conference calls and et cetera, et cetera. And I realized myself, I probably wasn't paying attention very much on these conference calls. Now that we've gone video, things have changed. One agency I won't name, they basically said, well, it's okay to work at home. We don't usually allow that. Make sure that your family doesn't interfere with you. Meanwhile, everybody's at home with their kids. So I think we've gotten a little bit more realistic over the last 90 days. So what do we see us when we go back to the office? What do we see us? What's going to stick? What's going to change? So I'll just open it up to the audience. How we completely changed the way government's doing business as a result of this? Nobody dive in first. Yeah. What do we think in our agencies is going to be different? How about Scott? How about I call on you? Is that the way we have to do this?
Were you asking for us? I didn't know
Yeah.
if you were opening up to the audience or not. So a few things that I think may changes moving forward. Certainly, as I talked about with the adoption of folks using Skype more, I think oftentimes we had a number of situations where um, everyone wanted to crowd in conference rooms to have meetings. They felt as though it was always necessary to be in a conference room to have a meeting. I think that is something that will change. I also think that our agency also does a fair amount of international travel. We have a number of international meetings. And I know from talking with our international colleagues, they are looking at how they can save some travel costs associated by actually leveraging and continuing to use Skype and other video. We also have WebEx, other video conferencing capabilities to carry out some of those meetings as opposed to necessarily needing to travel to all of them. So I think the technology adoption certainly will change. Another area that I see as a potential change is the ability to, and we talked a little bit about this, but one of the areas that we're focused on is our greater use of low code to be able to quickly develop applications for our mission offices. And I see that as another area that we will that we're leveraging and will continue to leverage as we move forward coming out of the pandemic. So those are just a couple of
Great.
items.
Great. And maybe we'll go. I think everybody can chip in on this. How about
Yeah.
Devarius? Or you want to? Well, anybody. I think we got everybody on. We got Hollywood
I'm
Squares
going.
kind of.
I'm going comment. This is Vaughn.
Oh,
I hope a
we
lot.
weren't okay.
I hope a lot of things change. I think the last 3 months we're developing new behaviors, new ways of working. I can personally say that I haven't printed a piece of paper or put a wet signature on any document in the last 3 months, and I think it would be tragic if we went back to the way we worked before and didn't embrace them. I think we've developed new ways of conducting business, and I think those new behaviors need to stick going forward. I think some of the things that we learned about ourselves is in the midst of a stressful situation, don't create more stress, right? So we were very active about how we communicated complex things like new training on new tools, right? So before COVID started, we recognized that as an IT community, we may not be the best trainers because we tend to have our own language, and we're trying to communicate with employees who don't necessarily understand or care to understand the IT terms that we're trying to help them learn. And so what we were able to do is actually internalize that within our organization and really focus on the communications, right? When you communicate to somebody, you want to make sure they understand it. You don't want to create more stress. And I think the other thing that we identify were different ways of working. We talked about VPN and stressing VPN. Early on, we had researchers who were coming to us saying, "Hey, your VPN is really slow. and we need your help. And through that dialogue, what we learned is, hey, they took their laptop home and their data sets were still sitting in their computer center, and they were trying to move data back and forth, right? And so there was an education process that happened, saying, we've got this thing called VDI, and let us introduce you to that. And it changed the whole way of working, right? No longer do you need to have data pulled back and forth to your mobile device. You can basically work on-prem with your data basically resident with you. And so we've changed behaviors, work behaviors, and I think that's what needs to stick. I think the other thing that we need to focus on is the digitization of government. I think we've had a lot of opportunities, and there's been a lot of efforts made to digitize government. I think we need to take advantage of that. We need to really look at what does true digitization of the federal workforce and how we do business internally and externally look. I think those are things that I'm hoping will stick.
Great. Anybody else want to chip in there? I think this is an important one.
Sure. Yeah, I wasn't sure earlier if you were addressing us, so I didn't share. But
I think I misspoke.
really,
Actually, I got chatter there, so everybody tells me when I mess up, which
oh,
is good
okay,
to say.
it's fine. Yeah, so the one thing that we probably might telework, I think, is one thing that So we talk about using virtual tools, and of course, we want to make sure that we're reducing our costs and traveling, make sure we can interact with our clients more frequently. But it does really beg the question now: do we really need to be in facilities to do the work? And I can, from what we can see, we don't have the data yet, but it looks like we're able to do most of our work without being in a building. And so we're really, thinking about should we speed up our plans to do hoteling. It certainly validates what we've been talking about for some years, and maybe we should be thinking about it. I look at the cost, and it speaks volumes, literally volumes of money when we talk about cost of being in spaces. So I think I'm hoping that it brings that to some policy change there. Um, then also making sure that we are changing business process. And so we had a goal. We have a goal at ITA to really be transformative. And we actually say in my group, Technology Services and Innovation, that we are leading um, uh, digital transformation. And what that means to us is that our business is looking for new ways to do things through the use of technology. And so we have seen the turn. Obviously, we can't do face to face. So we have been looking at new ways, and our customers are coming to us to look for new ways to do things within technology, which it was a struggle. I will tell you, when we first stood up that digital strategy organization, they weren't quite sure how that was going to work and what that looked like. But now they are begging for it. They see how fast we can rapidly adopt things to deliver more value to our clients. And so they are really moving full steam ahead. And I'm just hoping that that continues if we do wind up going back to what we think is going to be normal in being in a work site.
Hi,
Great.
this is Sanjay.
Various. Sanjay, go ahead.
I was going to add just two more points, a slightly different view on this is um, one of the things we have proven collectively is what I call as digital only workflows. Obviously, somebody had made a point earlier about, we've probably not seen a piece of paper in the last 60, 90 days, which is, I think, a very good sign. And the fact that we have been able to operate like that is a validation of the fact that we can and indeed have accomplished digital only workflows. And I would want us to all sort of, implore ourselves to say, why can't we not continue on digital only workflows as we come back to the offices as and when that happens? So that's one important takeaway. The second takeaway of the telework aspect, I want to bring a slightly different nuance on that is if we all are convinced that we can produce in a telework situation. I think we do feel very strongly that we can and have produced and have met the mission goals and objectives. The other implication is from a hiring standpoint of talent. So hopefully we can look at from a policy standpoint to see if we can have people who are not necessarily physically located in the Washington D.C. area, correct? They could be anywhere in the country for that matter, and be a equal or at least a co-equal participant in contributing to the mission objectives. So it now opens up a talent pool much wider than what probably has been more restrictive because of the requirement to be at the headquarters, if you will, in the DC area. So those are the two sort of aspects that I would probably want to have us all to be thinking aloud and being hopefully impressed upon the policymakers to take that into consideration as we look forward. So back to you, Tom.
Yeah, great first question. And Devarius, you want to chip in on this?
Yeah, one thing I'd probably add is I know even from Department of Army, DoD, and in the Corps, we've been looking at it from two aspects. Is the General Crawford considers this to be not so much the new normal, but the new now. So how do we operate in this construct? We've been looking at it from the aspect of human resources as well as talent, because ultimately now what this has shown us is that you don't have to be in a specific area in order not just to get the job done, but talent is everywhere. And with that being said, there's a balance that you have to be able to find as well too, because as we promote working remotely, there's still that human interaction element that needs to be considered as well. Because one of the things you'll find out is that most people, as they come new to an organization that may not be familiar as most, you have to be able to train those individuals, ensure that they know the right people, because 2/3 of our job is not so much technology, but it's the relationships in which it is that we build. And you begin to miss that human element by working remote and not knowing those right people. So the things that we're beginning to understand is how do we properly onboard individuals? How do we properly train a workforce as to how it looks now to be more 2028 focused? Because ultimately, right now, digital and remote is becoming the new now. So, how do we adjust to those things? So, those are all of the things that we're beginning to look at and try to bake in as we move forward. Because we talk telework, that means we have to engage with OPM a lot more because telework has specific policies that we need to look at that may or may not actually fit a true remote type of workforce when you begin to look at the policies around how individuals get paid, how we ensure that the right skill sets from a technology standpoint are reimbursed and those type of things. So policies will have to also adjust to the new norm as well in order for us to be able to get the right talent and be able to successfully deploy a lot of these new technologies in which it is that we're trying to lean forward in.
Great. We a lot of great questions there, kind of some more in the weeds ones. I think we really only have time for one. So I'm going to call on my friend Daryl Peak. I'm going to call out Daryl. Daryl was the former CTO at DHS, and he's on our board and works at Salesforce now. I like his question here. How has your vision of the future changed as a result of current events? Has it stayed the same, or do you pivot? Are there new measures of success? And I liken it to I used to coach football back in the day, and you come into the season with a plan. How has this changed? I know everybody here has plans. What are the vision of the future? What has changed, and we'll kind of close the program on that. Maybe start off with you, Vaughn.
Sure, thanks. So, I think you need to look backwards before you start looking forwards. And one of the things that I think everyone on this panel is engaged in is continuity of government operations and the type of planning that goes on every year when we exercise our playbook, if you will. And I think one of the things we see very quickly and that we've seen is there's never really been a whole of government play in the playbook. And I think one of the things that we recognize now is, you've got a plan, that was never, I probably dreamed of in the last 19 years, is everyone's going to be working from home, right? So when you look towards the future, you've got to take this event into consideration on all future plans, right? So we've talked about how do you remotely support your employees? How do you patch their systems? How do you engage with your external stakeholders in a meaningful way? How do you exchange information? I mean, all of these things which we've thought about and we have certain solutions in place, those solutions need to be rethought, and they need to look at a different type of scale. The scale is all of government, and when we start considering things going forward.
Great. Rona?
Yeah, I mean, we have a whole new tool set to work with to put into our strategy. You know, this it. I've always been of the mindset anyway that I operate with, you have to show me the limit before I believe that there is one. But this, it opens up a whole new um, area of opportunity for us to advance. And actually, you said, what does it look like? Actually, my telescope, the things in my telescope got a lot bigger for me because they're right here. The things I wanted to do 2 years from now, I'm able to do right now if we continue to leverage the things that we've learned here. I love that comment about the talent because I've already tried to start implementing that in my organization before now. It does. I have picked it up with hiring people that are outside of the DC area. We've proven that we don't need to be here to do that. And I was able to get some amazing talent that we would never have gotten in the government from private sector because it makes it more convenient. It's more convenient for them and to not have to move to DC, and it's something they want to do. And that just opens up a whole new area for us. So really excited about that. I can't tell you in particular exactly what's going to come in the near term, but I can tell you that we're going to be able to do some really amazing things shortly.
Yep. Devarius?
Yeah, so I'll say the new now it hasn't changed our philosophy. What I will say is it has accelerated. Where on a roadmap, some things will be 3 to 5. We've now moved things to the 8 to 12, and that's going through some of the various
Yeah.
processes and procedures, TPCs, and hurdles that you have to work through during the government. But it's no longer 3 to 5. It's now 8 to 12. Because if you begin to use just the football analogy that you started out with, I think that a standard playbook is what you have 12 standard plays to start a football game. But then when you begin to look at it, you throw in some trick plays and you also throw in various audibles, maybe to catch the defense off guard. And I think that's one of the things that has happened to us right now. We had a steady playbook and we were following that playbook, but we had to call several audibles because the new now has dictated a different tempo as we move forward. So we've adjusted to that at the Corps of Engineers. And one of the things we began to do is we've even taken our technology exploration even to the next level. We've expedited a lot of our cloud migration, our cloud modernization as well. So a lot of those efforts has allowed us to operate in a different posture, and it's also allowed us to enhance the culture in the organization because now what we thought we couldn't do at one point in time, it has forced us to say we can do it. And not just only can we do it or we can do it, but how do we do it even better than the current way as of right now? So we begin to look at our financial posture to invest additional resources from an FY21 standpoint, looking at it from a budgeting. Because a lot of times with IT, you always look at it as something that's always there, but you never remember that, hey, you have to invest something in order to receive the benefits that come along with it. So as an organization, we're starting to strategically invest more to see the benefits on the back end. So those are all of the things that have helped us embrace this new construct or the new now as we move forward.
Devarius, I love football analogies. I wanted to sneak this in. Somebody had a comment, a boxing and a quote from a boxer. I never thought I would bring this up, that a boxer in IT, but this is from Chuck James that brought this up. I'll give him the credit on it. This is a quote from Mike Tyson. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. It's pretty apropos.
That is
So,
true. Yeah,
Sanjay,
that is
you want
true.
to?
Yeah,
We got
I'll
we
just
got you and
make
Scott.
a three different points on this, and I think it's kind of echoing what everybody else has said. I'll kind of start with the first one, which is empowerment. The teams, at least from my SBA standpoint, were empowered, and they produced what I call is the art of the possible. Um, Granted, I know we talked about the pros and cons of working remotely, but we used all kind of collaborative tools. we worked together, and we were challenged with things which we were never challenged with before. And I kind of want to be proud of the fact that, typically the government usually takes a lot of beating for not being able to respond, not being able to move fast. But I think this has been the perfect time for illustrating that yes, we can do it. Yes, we can deliver. Yes, we are smart people. Yes, we can produce innovative solutions and respond to demands of the citizens at large, right? So I think it's a very powerful outcome from that standpoint of empowerment of teams and individuals to produce the right results. And what I call is the art of the possible has now become possible. It's no longer a theory. It's no longer a conjecture. It is what has been delivered. It's what's been proven. So I think those are the things that I feel are highlights in terms of how the vision is going to change. Obviously, I'll just kind of repeat whatever everybody else has said. What used to take a year can be done in much shorter period of time. So we don't have to look for longer periods of time. So modernization, we at the SBA modernize at a pace, call it rocket speed. And so if we can do it now, why can't we continue to sort of, if not the same pace, but a much faster pace than what probably we had originally anticipated. So again, empowerment, proving the art of the possible, and modernization at speed. That'd be the three sort of takeaways.
Great. And Scott, you take us home here.
Yeah, I think most things have been said. I think I would add, it is an opportunity for us to leverage. Right now, our staff seems to be fertile in terms of their willingness to accept new technology and try different things. And I think there's really an opportunity to really build on that and engage the staff as we try to move out on new technologies. There are some things that we need to think about that maybe are a little bit different than what we were originally planning in terms of our roadmap. But there is an opportunity to make that pivot and get an opportunity to really have staff embraces new technologies. I think there's really an opportunity, as I said, to get them to embrace new technologies and allow us to really move on in a way in ways that we haven't. It was always more difficult. You could develop the technology, you could present it, but to get them to embrace and adopt and implement was been more of a challenge. And I think they're more open to it now that they've been placed in a situation where they've had to do that.
Fantastic. That'll do it for this panel. Thank you, Vaughn, Devarius, Scott, Rona, Sanjay. Appreciate it. It's been a great discussion, and I've enjoyed this. And I wish we had more time for questions. This hour just kind of flew by. Thank you all. And now we're going to take a little bit of a break, touch and go break. Please go visit our partners. You've got a couple opportunities to do it at 2:00 when everything's done. You'll be able to go do it again. Please visit them. We are going to break to the tracks now, and they start at approximately 11:45. So thank you for your attention, and enjoy the rest of the program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.